We talked about anxiety on Sunday, what Jesus had to say about anxiety. We talked about the key to antidote to anxiety is to pursue something else, like seeking God and His righteousness. Change your perspective. Um, and I didn't bring any of the research with me because I actually hadn't planned on talking about this, but I've been doing a lot of work with people lately when I do more of a life coaching type thing and work with people who are grieving and stuff. There's so much. In fact, the backdrop of this is this. I got a call yesterday to do the Suicide Survivors Conference again. For those of you that don't know, I used to be on the board of the Florida Initiative for Suicide Prevention. And when we talk about survivors, these are not survivors of people who tried to take their own life, but they are actually, it's for the people who are left behind when someone has ended their life due to suicide. The problem is right now, 2020 was really changed the game. The opioid crisis is at an all-time high. A doctor friend of mine told me a few weeks ago, and I confirmed this from different sources, that, and you have to, the numbers aren't perfect, so if you go, oh my gosh, you misquoted the numbers, let me know and I'll correct it. But I believe that, and I just read recently that they're estimating that overdoses in the United States, drug overdoses, and this is just accident. It may have been accidental and intentional. 93,000 plus people. Now, what that says to you, the difference is that the average is usually around, I think around 40, 50, 60,000. So it was up a substantial portion due to coronavirus because people that were having trouble normally coping with the difficulties of life wind up then taking more opioids, taking more things to try to numb, not physical pain in that case, but emotional pain. And addiction is up like never before. And I think the biggest challenge that we are facing with this addiction crisis that we are in is we're going to see more accidental overdoses and more intentional overdoses. We're going to see more, continue to see more suicides because of the emotional pain and things that people are in. If you know someone that is dealing with it, I have to say this, it's so important to get them connected to a legitimate group. We used to have AA groups meeting at the church, NA groups. There's so many different groups, and I know people like, I don't like a group setting. I don't like to be in groups and talk about my stuff. Well, the problem is the reason why the group, I should say, why it's a problem for some people, is it provides. It's an accountability thing because you hear the stories of other people and you're like, it doesn't help me to hear it, but it actually does because you hear their story and you can also see the same mistakes that they are making. The challenge with when people give up one substance is they will often replace it with something else. I do a lot of work with this in the grief recovery program. We call them STIRBs. I don't call them STIRBs. The Grief Recovery Handbook calls them STIRBs, which stands for Short-Term Energy Relieving Behaviors. You talk to people who, for instance, stop drinking. Sometimes they stop drinking, and then they start smoking, or they stop smoking, and they start something else. I remember years ago, my dad quit smoking just like that, and we were all amazed by it because he just one day said, "Okay, I'm done." And but I remember him telling a friend of his, he said, it was like I was in this room and I left the cigarettes behind, and he says, I walked out the door and I picked up 20 pounds. Because we sometimes replace one substance with another. And it happens to people in that, and it happens to people, by the way, with relationships. You get people that are jumping from relationship to relationship to relationship because they haven't actually dealt with the stuff that is going on inside their head. And so it's like replacing one addiction for another before we actually deal with the stuff that's going on. And this is going to become more prevalent. You're going to see it in the people that are around you, the people that you love. And often the warning signs that are there are masked. Um, I'm always amazed by the dumb things that people say to suicide survivors, to the people who are left behind, and I always tell them, and it's shocking when they hear it for the first time. But one of the dumb questions that they'll get is if they've lost somebody to suicide. So people will actually ask this question. They will say, "Didn't you have any signs that it was coming? Didn't you have any indication that maybe they were going to take that step?" And of course, that's a hurtful question, because the answer to that is no. But I tell these folks, I said, if you want to take control back of the conversation, look at them the next time and say, actually, we did see the signs that they were going to harm themselves, but we decided to do nothing about it. And then just wait in silence and let them, because people saying dumb things to you because they're trying to help, it doesn't give them permission to make things worse on you. So this whole idea of all these things sort of go together. There's accidental overdoses, there's suicide, there's all of these things, and it goes to the emotional well-being of people. The emotional intelligence, and the key to emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And if you're not aware of what you're doing yourself, get somebody that's close to you to sit down with you but to be willing to listen to them. Like, the worst thing you can do is enable people. When we were, I think I told some of you all the story that my daughter's now finishing up her master's degree here, and she'll be finished in December. When she first went to college at Florida Atlantic University, they had a guy that came in and started talking about how we actually enable our children, and he talked about helicopter parents, and then he used a new term called lawnmower parents, because actually what was happening is they had because FAU there were people who lived on campus, but a lot of them lived in the area, but they literally would have occasionally some parents during the year, if their college age child was ill and couldn't get to class, they had parents that would call, and it wasn't just moms, it was dads, because it could happen with either one. I know they go helicopter moms, or but there's both. There's helicopter moms and helicopter dads, and lawnmower moms and lawnmower dads. And but they said that they would literally get a parent that would call and say, "Hey, is it okay if I come and sit into my son's classes, because he's sick today and I want to take notes for him, because I think he's got a test coming up." And one of the professors that was talking about this was like, he said, "I got nothing. Like, what do you say to something like that?" So we spend too many times enabling behaviors that we should confront, and we're usually our own worst enemy when it comes to self-awareness. One of the things that I do in my work outside the church with people is I have assessments that I do that actually, and it's a behavioral assessment that will assess how somebody their particular behaviors, what their strengths are. It will also do what motivates them. We call their driving forces. By the way, Tony Robbins uses this same assessment when he talks about your driving forces. And then also somebody's emotional intelligence. It'll talk about your self-awareness, your ability to have self-control, your ability to have empathy and motivation, and your social skills. And it'll rate those 5 components, because people just aren't emotionally aware. That's why they jump from addiction to addiction, and that's why, by the way, they jump from relationship to relationship to relationship. It's always interesting to me when someone, you get a divorce one time, and this is no judgment. I'm just saying, you get a divorce one time, there's a good chance that it may not be you. You get a divorce a second time, there may be a situation that you perhaps contributed to, maybe that you're just getting into the same dysfunctional relationships. Get a divorce a third time, and you really need to look at what you're doing. It's the same thing with jumping from relationship to relationship to relationship. People don't know how to drop the emotional baggage, and it's like I always tell folks when they are, in fact, I believe it's AA says, do not even jump into a relationship until you've been in recovery for at least a year. I find that's very interesting because it's interesting because the emotional baggage we often don't leave behind, and it clouds our continued thinking. So I think it's real important to understand how this emotional intelligence sort of plays in to addiction and all of these other things. And folks, let me just explain something to you. Christians, believers in Jesus, are in no way, shape, or form immune to this. There are so many believers that I knew growing up that had addiction issues. By the way, pornography is another addiction issue that nobody likes to talk about. It's kind of like the shh, but it's a big one, and there's just so much that is out there, and so often what it's doing is those addictions, and it could be something like opioids, but it could be something like food. It could be something else that is consumed your attention, and you may have turned to, I'm going to close the loop on it, because of anxiety. Because we often don't know what to do with our negative emotions, we will reach for a substance, we will reach for an addiction, and it gives us that hit of dopamine that we need for the moment, that gives us a rush, that makes us feel better for the moment. We go, oh, I'm okay. And then all of a sudden we crash again. So when we talk about anxiety, I think it's really important to make sure that we are careful about trying to overcome anxiety with something other than confronting the emotional issues that are giving us that anxiety. Learning to manage it without having to go to substances and relationships and other things that create codependence on drugs, on others, alcohol, anything else, porn. All of those things can just make matters so much worse. And so I would. Is there good anxiety? Yeah, but you know what? I wouldn't. Kathy, that's a great question. The way anxiety is referred to in the scriptures, the answer is no. But and I don't know what we would relabel that. There is I think there's a certain, for example, I don't know what I'd call it, but no matter when I get ready to speak, even if it's at home, at the church where I'm more comfortable, there is a certain amount of anxiety, but it's more of not worry. It's just it's a heightened state of alertness that actually, in fact, guy said this with speaking. He says, and I forgot. I'm trying to think who it was. It was a nationally known speaker talked about speaking and how do you get rid of the butterflies. And the guy said, I don't get rid of them. The butterflies are always there. I just make them fly in formation. And so I think that's good, because there's a certain amount of things that allow us that heightened state of adrenaline, of awareness, when we're going into a job interview or that kind of a thing. But I'm talking about the damaging anxiety that causes us to go over and over and over again, play things over and over and over again, worrying about 90% of the negative things that are going to happen that never really happen. And so that's a great question, though, because I don't think that anxiety itself is always a good thing. I do think that being alert, being concerned, planning, and all of that's a good thing. But when it steps over into it becomes an obsession, and then we reach for something else instead of confronting whatever it is that we're dealing with. Because we've all got stuff. We've all got things that we are dealing with in our lives. And it's easy to try to numb the pain rather than confront it. And I think that's the big thing. I think it's knowing that we've got pain issues that we have to deal with, and not coddling them, not enabling them, not encouraging them, not allowing yourself to become a victim, and not just accepting when people talk about, well, you have to accept yourself. No, I don't. I don't have to accept my addictions. I don't have to accept my emotional, my emotional, pockmark, so to speak, the areas that I need to work on. No, I don't need to accept them. I need to be aware of them so that I can change them. And so, because if not, again, what we talked about Sunday is what consumes you controls you. And so once you start to be consumed by that, and then becomes a vicious cycle where it's consuming, controlling, consuming, controlling, consuming, controlling. So it's just been on my heart, just because I've been dealing with so many situations lately, and then the call to speak at the Suicide Survivors Conference in November of this year, which I will be doing, I think, via Zoom. I've agreed to do it. And by the way, we will have people that if you know somebody that's lost a loved one to suicide, send me an email to info@cbcfl.org. You will actually, these are usually attended in person. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we're going to be doing it via Zoom again this year, which means we can take people from all over the country and, yes, all over the world to do this year. And it's a free conference. So if you know anybody that's dealt with suicide, this conference will be for them. We'd love to have them be a part of it. So make sure that you let me know about that, and I can forward their list to the great folks at the Florida Initiative for Suicide Prevention. They're now part of a larger organization, which I'm excited about, and I got a call from our ex-executive director, but still involved in it, Jackie Rosen. Harry Rosen, way back in 2000 and probably around 2000, 2001, 2002, called me to meet with me. He was the mayor of Weston at the time, or the ex-mayor of Weston, but Harry has been the mayor of Miramar, and then he was the first mayor of the city of Weston. Harry and Jackie lost their son Mitch to suicide many years ago, and it drove them to start this organization. So it was pretty interesting. And Jackie's written a book, and they're just wonderful people that are always giving back and seeking to help folks. And so good organization. So if you know anybody that needs support through this, and by the way, this can impact people years and years and years later. I'm also, on another side, we've been kicking around ideas. I have not done a grief recovery program, easing the pain of grief and loss, for probably about 5 or 6 years. There has been some preliminary discussions about doing it at our church, but it's for people that have actually experienced loss, and that could be, there's over 40 different types of losses. There's everything from people who lost a pet to lost a kid, and I know you're going to say, but there's a big difference between the two, but not to the person that's feeling it. So divorce, death, overcoming childhood stuff, dealing with forgiveness and all of that. It's a program I've done, over the years. We usually do it just for material cost, and part of it is that assessment that I do. Everybody gets one of those assessments, but it's really not designed to help you deal with others, how to help others deal with their grief and loss, but it's to help you confront and deal with your losses. And it's always an interesting discussion time. And so anyway, all of that's going on. Thank you for watching today. I thought we were going to be done early, but guess what? I kept going, and you hung in there, and I appreciate it. So pass this along to somebody that you know who maybe is got questions about the Bible, like we had earlier, also maybe dealing with anxiety or drug addiction, relationship addiction, all of these things. So much stuff going on, and so many hurts that people are experiencing in their lives. And so that's where God has called us to be a guide to help these people to get where they need to go. So anyway, God bless you. Love you all. Thank you for joining today, and we will see you Sunday.